T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, well we did it, finally, after last week's carnival of, just dysfunction and errors, we finally got everything worked out, tested it all yesterday, and so this is the show we were supposed to do last week, but some things are just meant to happen that way. And today, I guess we're going to introduce me and introduce the show, and the gentleman who got in touch with me and asked me to do this, Micheal Brooks, the founder of Coach on Fire Radio Network, he's here with me, and we're going to flip the tables in the future. I'll be the one asking questions. I've already lined up some really great big-name guests, so I'll be letting you know who they are in the future here. But right now, I just want to introduce Micheal. One, thank him for giving me this opportunity, and let him tell you a bit more about himself. And then from there, I guess he's going to put me on the hot seat. So, Micheal, how are you doing this morning?
Well, thank you, Kenny, and I appreciate being on your very first show. I apologize. We had some technical issues last week, but we have got them all worked out. So we are actually simulcasting here on Facebook Live and through the radio network. And you can listen to all of our shows, including Kenny's brilliant upcoming show, Your Journey to Success. And I'm just absolutely thrilled and privileged to have him on the network. He's going to be transforming lives with every episode, as he does daily for his clients literally around the world. He is a life coach, and we needed another life coach on the Coach on Fire Network, especially with the types of stuff Kenny does. And he has a really, really inspiring story that I want to get into here a little bit first, and then we're going to talk about what he's going to be doing on the show to make it must-listen radio and must-watch on Facebook Live, because quite literally he is going to be transforming lives and giving you things you can take to the bank and use to be more successful on a daily basis. So thank you for having me, Kenny, on your first show. And as I said, I'm thrilled to have you with the Coach on Fire Radio Network. And if you're listening on Facebook Live, welcome. If you're listening anywhere on the radio network through Spreaker or any of the other Coach on Fire channels or any of Kenny's channels, then welcome as well. This is one of my favorite things to do with all of the hosts, because I get to learn a little bit more about you along with the listeners. And obviously we talked off air a little bit, so I know a little bit about you, but you have a really, really authentic, transparent, and interesting story, Kenny, and it kind of led you to your own journey to becoming a life coach and helping others. Why don't we start with that and just briefly go over your story and how you got to where you are today, because it really is quite inspiring.
Sure. Well, thank you, Micheal. I'll try and make it short. I wrote a book about it. I'll try and get it, the Cliff Notes version. But, really, I guess one thing, I was born with an ability just to feel things and walk in a room and I could feel what was going on. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And it was a bit, at that age, it's a bit too overpowering. And then, like all of us, because there's no model in place for parenting, we just aren't taught how to be effective parents. I mean, none of us are bad people. We just don't have the information. And my parents were 16 and 18 when they're married, 4 kids by 21 and 23. So that's pretty overwhelming in itself. And my mom became an alcoholic. And, one of the sentinel moments, we all suffer levels of trauma from our parents or teachers or people. And the big one for me was I was about 10 or 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night and found my mom passed out naked on the toilet. And what that did, obviously my my parents were doing the best they could, and they didn't know how to help themselves through it, so they couldn't really help us through it. And what I didn't know at the time was that when we go through trauma, we then basically create a life story to try and relive it and reconcile it. And so every single choice I ever made after that was leading me to this. I just wasn't aware of it. And I wasn't aware, that normally our choices become something that work against us. This is the first job or career I've actually chosen for myself, and it's the first one that works for me. So because of finding my mom, I ended up becoming an alcoholic myself, sex addict, spending addict, sugar addict, tobacco addict, love addict. I had 2 horrific divorces, child custody battle, bankruptcy, and then I was contemplating suicide. And that's kind of the American life, right? I mean, it's not really that extraordinary of a story. Unfortunately, that's kind of how life goes nowadays. And because we just aren't taught these things, and we don't have any mechanism in place in schooling to talk about parenting or relationships or emotions. So, I mean, look at the school shootings, look at the divorce rate. It's obviously, to me at least, we need some information on that. And luckily for me, because of that ability to feel, I was always curious, what the hell happened to me? Why do I keep choosing this? So even in my early 20s, I started reading and trying to figure it out. And then eventually I got with a counselor after my first divorce. And about over a 10-year period, I probably spent 7 full years working with him and learning about, a lot of the stuff I talk about in my book and a lot of the things I've learned. And, he saw it right away. He's like, Kenny, you have a gift. And he asked me to come work for him. But at the time, now as looking back, I was like, oh, the divorce, money, I can't go back to school. As I see now, the truth is there was an addiction I didn't want to give up, and I knew I'd have to if I worked for him. So I would run groups, and he would send some clients my way that I'd talk to on the phone and stuff like that. So I did a little bit kind of like this years ago, but, I wasn't ready. I had my second marriage almost killed me, but without it, I wouldn't be here. I needed that life experience to now be able to, it helped me figure out how this process I talk about in my book works in every one of us. And I wouldn't have figured that out if it hadn't been for her. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version. I mean, you can pick out pieces if you want to, learn more about them, but that's the basics of how I got here.
Where was that aha moment that you had to change? Was it after that first divorce and getting counseling? And you said you'd been reading all throughout your 20s, but was there some lowest point? Was that your divorce where I've got to seek help and I have got to change? Is that where that happened, or did it happen before that?
That was the first big one, of like when I walked into his office. His first question to me is, Kenny, what brought you here? What are you doing here? And I said, I need to learn how to be a man. I knew, in a marriage, both sides fail, but I knew that there were some issues with me, and I didn't know how to take care of me or somebody else. And so that was the first real big piece was, in my late 30s going, I need some help. And and then the second, really it's been 2. It's been after my divorces. I put the first batch of it together after that first divorce. And then the second aha, and I guess really more, I hate to use the word enlightenment, but kind of the complete story came after my second divorce when I kind of put the final. There were pieces I just couldn't figure out while working with my counselor, and those pieces came together after the second divorce.
And after the fact of those divorces, as coaches, we often use traumatic experiences and life experiences as learning tools. What was, and you now work with people on relationship issues, and and you've been through a lot yourself. What would you say in that first divorce was your biggest takeaway from a relationship standpoint?
Wow, the biggest? There were so many.
Okay, two or three.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful for her. As bad as the marriage was, she taught me so much about myself. One, the power of saying no. We have a culture through song, movies, TV, books, everything. It basically says, if you're in love, you have to give up everything and, sacrifice. And really what that, you have to say yes to whatever they want, really. And what I found is yes is the most manipulative word you can say in a relationship. It's why relationships don't work, because we've all had that experience of at some point turning to our partner and going, hey, I've been doing A, B, C, and D for you. When are you going to give me X? Well, there's the proof of it. You said yes to A, B, C, and D because you were trying to manipulate X out of them. And so saying no is loving. In other words, I'm not going to throw this back in your face. I'm not going to use it against you. I'm going to tell you who I am authentically. Instead of saying yes to manipulate you to like me and stay with me and all these things, I'm going to say no so you can decide early on, well, do I like that personality trait or not? And, so that was one of the major things I walked away with, is that no is the most loving thing you can ever say to somebody. And also the second thing would be, and this really I learned after my second marriage, that nobody you pick is ever the problem, ever. They've never done anything wrong. You pick them. So if there's a so-called issue with them, well, you need to look at yourself, because you're the one who chose that issue. And it's trying to teach you something about yourself. And so we all pick partners to show us parts of ourselves that are broken that we don't want to address. And so those would be the two pieces that I've walked away, from is learn to say no. And if you don't like something in them, it's something about you.
And you also work with clients on these types of issues, and those seem like difficult transformations to not only get people to understand, but to get them to put into practice.
Yeah.
So how do you as a coach go about doing that? I understand that every client is completely different.
Sure.
You've got to use different approaches and things like that. But in general, those are very, very difficult transformations to make. How do you go about showing them and having them put that in place in practice?
Well, the first piece is awareness. Since none of us are taught, we don't take a single class on how to have a relationship. We don't have the information. So there's an education process of, did you realize that the relationship model that we've been taught is something called codependency and love addiction? That's what that feeling of love we all get is the exact same chemical reaction as taking cocaine. It's not love, it's pure intensity. But we don't know that, so we keep seeking this addiction versus a true relationship. So the first element is, one, awareness of the dynamics at play, and then, giving them slowly, because the way the brain works and the body works and denial works, it's hard. That's why it's hard to change, of slowly giving them tools and things to try and bring into the relationship so that they can start to see, oh my God, I had no idea how manipulative this is. Because most people, we just aren't aware. Again, we're not bad people. We just don't know that this is what we're doing. It's all, most of it is subconscious. It's playing on a loop of something we've seen. We think it's right. So the first real key step is creating, teaching, education, and awareness that this is the dynamic at play, and this, for each